Okay, so you want to own an undersea internet cable. Lay a wire across the bottom of the ocean. Connect 2 continents, and then sit back and charge the entire world a toll every time a message, a video, a bank transfer, or a phone call crosses between them. It sounds like science fiction. It sounds like something only a government could do. And it sounds like it would print money forever. But here's the strange part. Almost every single thing you do on the internet, right now, this video included, is traveling not through satellites in space the way most people assume, but through a bundle of glass fibers roughly the thickness of a garden hose, lying unguarded on the floor of the ocean, thousands of miles from land. 99% of all international data crosses the planet this way, not through the sky, through the deep. And the entire global system rests on a network so fragile that a single fishing boat dragging its anchor in the wrong place can sever the connection between continents. And the people who own these cables are increasingly not the phone companies you'd expect. They're a small handful of technology companies you already give money to every day, which means the invisible pipes that carry the modern world are quietly becoming private property. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how this business works, what it actually costs to lay a wire across an ocean, how the owners turn that wire into money, and why the people building the newest cables often don't care about the toll at all. And you'll understand the terrifying vulnerability at the center of it. The reason navies are now patrolling these cables and why the ocean floor is being called the next great theater of war. Let's start with what it actually costs to get in. There is no cheap version of this. The cable itself, the physical glass, runs somewhere between $6,000 and $20,000 per kilometer, depending on how many fiber pairs are inside and how heavily it's armored. And near the shore, where fishing nets and ship anchors do the most damage, you armor it heavily, because that shallow water is where cables die. But the cable is the cheap part. Every 50 to 80 kilometers along the route, you need a repeater, a device that sits on the seabed and boosts the light signal so it doesn't fade to nothing over thousands of miles. Each repeater costs around $200,000, and a single transoceanic cable needs dozens of them. Then you need landing stations on each end, the buildings on the coast where the cable comes ashore and connects to the land network, and those can cost millions each. Add it all together and the numbers get serious fast. A new transatlantic cable connecting North America to Europe costs somewhere between $200 and $250 million to build. And the truly ambitious projects dwarf that. There is a globe-spanning cable system in development, more than 40,000 kilometers long, wrapping most of the way around the planet, with a reported budget north of $10 billion. So the entry fee ranges from a couple $100 million for one ocean crossing to $10 billion to wire the world. But the price tag is not what should stop you. Because there are 2 costs nobody warns you about, and both of them are permanent. And one of them can arrive on any random Tuesday with no warning at all. The first is that you cannot lay this cable yourself, and you cannot hire just anyone to do it. On Earth, there are only a tiny number of companies capable of manufacturing and installing a submarine cable. 4 private firms build and install around 98% of all the undersea cable on the planet. 4, and they each own a small fleet of highly specialized cable-laying ships, vessels over 500 feet long, and those ships are booked years in advance. Demand is so hot that if you decide today you want to lay a cable, you may be waiting until the end of the decade just to get a ship. You are not entering a market. You are lining up for a resource that barely exists. The second hidden cost is the one that turns this from an infrastructure business into a gamble. Cables break constantly. Somewhere in the world, a submarine cable is being repaired almost every few days. Most of it is mundane. An anchor, a fishing trawler, an undersea landslide, simple wear. And when it happens, you can't just send a diver. You have to dispatch one of those rare specialized ships, have it sail out to the exact fault location, grapple a hair-thin cable up from potentially thousands of meters of black water, splice it, and lower it back down. A single repair costs between $1 and $3 million, and the ship time runs tens of thousands of dollars a day. And here's the part that should make you nervous as an owner. You often have to pay to be part of a maintenance agreement that keeps a repair ship on standby, whether or not your cable ever breaks. It's an insurance policy on the ocean itself, and the ocean always eventually collects. So the costs are brutal, and the risks are constant. Which brings us to the real question. How does owning one of these cables actually make money? For decades, the answer was simple and elegant, and it worked like a toll road. You build the cable, and then you sell its capacity to everyone who needs to move data across that ocean. The phone companies, the internet providers, the big corporations, and you sell it in two main ways. The first is a straight lease. A customer rents a chunk of your bandwidth for a few years and pays you for it. And when prices change, they can renegotiate. The second is the clever one, and it's the backbone of this whole industry. It's called an indefeasible right of use, or an IRU. And an IRU is essentially a long-term, unbreakable lease on a slice of your cable's capacity, sold up front for 10, 20, sometimes 30 years at a time. Think about what that does for you as the owner. Before your cable even switches on, you can sign anchor customers to IRUs, huge buyers who pay you enormous sums upfront for guaranteed capacity for decades. That money helps fund the construction. You're effectively pre-selling the pipe before you've finished laying it. And here's the beautiful part. The company that buys an IRU from you can then turn around and lease that capacity to somebody else at a markup. So your single cable spawns an entire layered marketplace of capacity being resold and resold on top of itself. And at the bottom of that whole tower, collecting from the very first transaction, is you, the owner. There's one more wrinkle that matters. This is a business where the money is best at the very beginning. A cable earns its highest prices the moment it enters service, when its capacity is new and scarce. Over time, as newer cables launch and technology improves, the price of bandwidth on your route falls. So the game is to sign your big long-term IRUs early, lock in that revenue while your cable is the newest and fastest on the route, and bank it before the next cable comes along and undercuts you. It is a race against your own obsolescence. So that's the classic model. Build the pipe, pre-sell it with decades-long IRUs, and collect the toll when it works. A well-placed cable on a busy route is a machine that generates income for 25 years. And for a long time, that was the entire business. Telecom companies formed consortiums, split the cost, split the capacity, and shared the toll booth. But here's where this entire industry has been quietly turned upside down. And it's the part almost nobody understands. Because the biggest players building cables today are not selling the toll at all. Go back 15 years. And traditional telecom companies used the vast majority of the world's international bandwidth. Today, a small group of technology giants, the ones that run the world's cloud and social and search platforms, Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, now own or lease around half of all undersea bandwidth on Earth. Half. And they didn't do it to become toll collectors. Here's the logic. And it's the reframe of the entire video. When you operate global services with billions of users and enormous data centers scattered across every continent that constantly need to talk to each other, you move so much data across the oceans that past a certain point, it becomes cheaper to build your own cable than to keep renting space on someone else's. You're no longer a customer of the pipe. You become the pipe. So these companies started laying their own private cables, not to sell capacity to the public, but to carry their own traffic between their own data centers with total control over the route, the speed, and the security. You're not looking at a toll road business anymore. You're looking at private highways built by a handful of corporations for their own exclusive use across the floor of the ocean. The cable isn't the product. The cable is the thing that makes the actual product, their global services, work at all. They will happily spend $10 billion on a wire that earns no toll whatsoever because the wire protects a business worth 1,000 times more. And that changes what you're really buying. If you own a cable in this new world, you're not just holding an income stream. You're holding a strategic asset, a piece of the physical foundation of the internet that the most powerful companies on Earth are competing to control. And that is exactly why this business has become dangerous in a way it never used to be. Because now we get to the part that has put warships on top of these cables. Remember how I described this network at the start? Glass wires the thickness of a garden hose lying on the open seabed, largely unguarded. Now consider that the entire financial system, every government, every military, and essentially the whole global economy runs across them. And consider that they can be cut by anyone with a ship and an anchor in international waters, where it is almost impossible to prove intent. A severed cable and a dropped anchor look exactly the same on the bottom of the sea, this is no longer hypothetical. In the Baltic Sea, cables and pipelines have been damaged in incidents that investigators linked to specific foreign vessels loitering in the area, with fingers pointed at deliberate sabotage disguised as accidents. Around Taiwan, there was a cluster of cable disruptions in a matter of weeks, serious enough that the government began treating cable damage with the same severity as attacks on water and gas pipelines. In the Red Sea, cables were knocked out as collateral damage from regional conflict, cutting connectivity for multiple countries at once. The vulnerability is so real that some of the newest, most expensive cable routes are now designed specifically to avoid the world's choke points, the narrow, contested waters where a single well-placed act of sabotage could sever a continent. And there simply aren't enough repair ships to fix a large-scale attack. The same scarcity that makes it hard to build a cable makes it catastrophic to lose several at once. This is why the United States keeps cable repair ships on permanent standby, why NATO has increased its naval presence around these routes, and why nations are rewriting their laws to protect a private infrastructure that they suddenly realized their entire existence depends on. That's the danger you inherit as an owner. You don't just own a cable, you own a target, a single point of failure for entire nations, sitting exposed on the ocean floor. And you cannot meaningfully guard thousands of miles of it. So let's put it all together. What do you actually make? Scenario 1. The traditional operator, you join a consortium and help fund a cable on a busy high-demand route, a transatlantic or a trans-Pacific line. You pre-sell IRUs to anchor customers to de-risk the build. You lease the rest. And for the next couple of decades, you collect a share of the toll on one of the most heavily used data corridors on Earth. It is capital intensive. It is slow, and your pricing power erodes every year as newer cables launch. But a well-placed cable on the right route is a genuine, long-lived, income-generating asset. This is the real business, and it is not glamorous. It is a toll road that happens to be underwater. Scenario 2. The strategic owner. You're not really in the cable business at all. You're a giant that moves oceans of data, and you build your own private cable to serve your own empire. You may never sell a dollar of capacity to the public. The cable pays for itself by making everything else you own faster, cheaper, and more secure, and by ensuring that no rival and no telecom company sits between you and your own customers. This is where the $10 billion projects live, and the return isn't measured in tolls. It's measured in control. So if you want to own an undersea internet cable, understand what you're actually buying. Not a wire, you're buying a piece of the nervous system of the modern world. A strand of glass on the floor of the ocean that carries the money, the messages, and the memory of entire civilizations. Own the right one on the right route, and the world pays you a toll for a generation. Own it in this new era. And you're holding something governments will send their navies to protect. The internet feels like it lives in the air, in the cloud, somewhere weightless and safe. It doesn't. It lives at the bottom of the sea, in the dark, on a wire someone owns. The only question is, who?